there may be more joining us throughout the hour. Okay. This will take an hour to run through, okay, and it is an introduction, as you're aware, to Logger Offline Backup. I'll just say about questions and so on. If you have any questions, then please try to either put them in chat, or as there are 54 of us, I might not get around to answering all questions. So if you feel you need to, then put them into an email and send them to me via email, and I'll get back to them afterwards. The session will be recorded as well and will be available to you on NICE University at a later date. Okay, so once this is all finished, that will be available to you. Okay, right then, gents. Without further ado, I think you're all fairly well aware of how to use WebEx. I think most of you have done it before, but if you do have a question or the green tick, for instance, just to attention to something, I will check the chat and emails as we go through the session, and I will try to answer any questions as I can. However, as I say, there's quite a few of you. We'll see how time goes. If we've got time at the end, I'll answer them. If not, then I'll do it via the email, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. What I'll do now is I'm just going to start recording the session, and then we'll get on to the actual PowerPoint presentation. The first part is PowerPoint, and then once we finish the PowerPoint, I will give you a quick demonstration on how or what it actually looks like on the system itself. Just get this going. Okay, so that's the recording started. Yeah, so from this point on, we're being recorded. I'm just going to share my screen with you now so that you can see the PowerPoint presentation. Oops, when I get it right. There we go. Okay. So, point then, you should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation. Just going to move my chat and participants list over where I can see it, and then we will start. Could somebody just let me know, can you see the PowerPoint presentation, please? Yeah, okay, that's great. I've got a couple of yeses, that means it's there. Right then, folks, we'll get started. So, introduction then to Logger Offline Backup. Okay, we specify this offline bit, as you'll see later on. Okay, it differs slightly from Storage Center, for instance. Okay, in the Storage Centers online, and what we're talking about here is offline storage. Okay, because of the way it works, and we'll explain that through as we go through. So, by the end of this, hopefully you'll understand the purpose of the Logger Backup used, okay, and Logger Backup versus Storage Center. A bit more on that. It's not really versus. They're slightly different in the way they work, so they really don't see each other. Once we've looked at that, we will then go through the architecture, what makes up the Logger Backup. Okay, and the actual archive retrieval flow and some of the supported media. Okay, we're talking here predominantly or mostly about 4.1. Okay, NICE Interaction Management for 4.1. Okay, but there will be slight cross references to Norm. Once we've done that, we will then take a look at how to configure it, and we'll do it mainly on the PowerPoint because, as you're well aware, the second I start to do a demonstration, then things probably won't work quite as well as we expect. So I will cover everything during the PowerPoint, and then hopefully we'll get a demonstration afterwards. Okay. So Logger Backup then, the purpose. One of the main reasons we need to log up back up the logger in any instance is the fact that the logger itself hasn't got a huge amount of space for the audio. So we have to back up that audio in some way. Okay, and a lot of us are aware of the storage center. Okay, but there's also this backup as well, which, as I say, complements the storage center. Now, just talking through the logger itself, here we've got 100%, okay, of a partition for the storage of audio. Now, it's not necessarily going to be that huge. Okay, so there's probably no way that we're going to be able to store, for instance, 7, 8, 9, 10 months worth of audio on this partition. And apart from that, the 100% of the partition on the logger is normally split up anyway. Okay, so the audio section of that would only actually be 90% of what's available on the logger, with 10% of the partition being buffer. Now, two things can happen here. If that audio fills up, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, if the audio fills up, then if there's no kind of mechanism to allow extra or over the top of this area to be stored on, then we're going to lose the audio. So as you're well aware, we have FIFO set up. And FIFO will allow us to get to 90% of this 90% area. Okay, so take out the buffer. We've got 90% of the audio space there. Once the 90% threshold is reached, then FIFO process begins, okay, and it starts to delete out the old audio until we get back down to 80% of the audio space remaining. Okay, so all of the time we're losing audio once this space is full. So that is one of the main reasons why we are going to need some kind of backup, be it backup that we're talking about, storage center, or in some cases, and in a lot of cases, both. Okay, so that's why we need it. It's because of the limited space and FIFO process on the logger. Let's take a look at it versus the storage center, because I've mentioned storage center a couple of times. Now, we're talking about logger offline backup. And the reason we stress this offline is because we can back up the audio on logger to either tapes, and in the case of Nice Interaction Management 4.1, it is only DAT tapes that are supported, along with network path. Okay. Now, with the tapes, we can either store or archive rather the entire amount of audio on the logger, or we can bring it down to archiving specific channels. Okay. Whereas if we're using a network path to a location, okay, then we only have the option to store all of the audio that comes through that logger. Okay. And we'll cover that in a bit more detail later on. If I take a quick look at the storage center now, it's online storage. Okay, so what we get with the storage center is we are able to go to the business analyzer, and if anything is stored on the storage center, then it's online. We can request a playback, it goes to the storage center, and it brings that straight back to us, which is different to the offline, because if we've got tapes, for instance, then whatever is on the tape, if it's no longer on the logger, we have to retrieve it back from the tape. And that goes the same for the network path. If the information is no longer on the logger, we have to actually physically retrieve it back from the through the network path, back to the logger for playback. Okay, so that's why we class this as offline and online. The storage center has also got much more flexibility and functionality as set up the rules and so on for the storage. Now, it doesn't mean really that one is better than the other. It just means that the storage center does its job extremely well, and the logger offline backup is exactly that. It's a backup. Okay, it's another way of securing this information. Okay, for future playback. If something happens to the storage center, then we have the offline backup, okay, as the backup. So it's not one or the other really. Preferably you would have both of these systems running at once. Okay, moving on. Let's take a look at the architecture and flow. The architecture itself, okay, we've got the audio being backed up, in this case, 4.1 system to DAT and network path, okay. If it was a nice perform system, then you have extra DDS, AIT, and you also have DVD supported as well, okay. The 4.1 is just DAT tapes and network path, whereas nice perform is all of these. Okay, and you would set up or equip the loggers with either single or dual drives if you're using tapes, okay, or if you're using a network path, it is only the single network path, okay, and you'd set them up dependent upon storage volume, archiving schemes, redundancy, okay, requirements from the customer. So that's the effectively the backup retrieval methods that we can use. And this is just to reiterate that 4.1 only supports DAT in the network path. Okay. For more information on what is supported, then the Certified Servers Guide, and this is an extract from the 4.1 Servers Guide, okay, shows you what is supported. And in this case, it just shows you that the DAT is supported, okay. The network path is supported by both. And also you can go to the archiving devices and media reference guide, okay, and that will give you a full rundown of everything that's supported, okay, by which machines and so on, high definition loggers and such, okay, and it shows you exactly what is supported by what. In this case, it's an extract, and it's just showing you DVD. Okay, so this is looking at the DVD side of it and showing that it would be supported by 3.5. Okay, but these are just two documents there for you to look at to see what is supported, okay, by 3.5 and by Nice Interaction Management, or I should say Nice Perform and Nice Interaction Management. Just looking through briefly some of the devices themselves, if you've not come across them. This is a DAT tape, okay. And it connects using SCSI or USB, okay, and it's got just looks like a very sort of like regular tape recorder, if you like, okay. We have a tape indicator that shows that information is being placed onto the tape, or that the tape is running, okay, and actually functioning. We've got a clean indicator there, okay, and we also have a manual tray eject, and a caution on that is don't use that manual tray eject if anything is happening on the tape itself, okay, because you can corrupt that tape and corrupt the data that's on there. Another use for the manual tray in this instance is if there is nothing going on to that tape at the time, and we can set up parameters to be able to manually eject the tape, which stops the backup from working. Okay, and it allows us to take that tape out and replace it with a new tape, or even in some cases to put an older tape back into there for repurposes. Okay, so that's looking at a tape device. The next one we will look at is the archiving to the file system. Okay, network storage. A note there is that when we're using the file, when we're going to network storage, it takes out all of the other backup devices. So if we're configured for tape, for instance, on the system, and we decide then at some stage we want to put network storage on, the tape DVD, if that's on there on a Nice Perform system, stop working. Okay, they are no longer functioning. So this is network storage, and effectively straight from the logger, okay, through the backup server, and the audio will be stored onto the network storage, okay, through a little system that we'll see shortly. Okay, so that's the items that would be used and the way that we can do it. If we take a look now at the actual archiving and retrieval flow, we'll see those the tapes and so on again. Okay, and we see how they sit in the system. So this is taking a look now at the archiving flow for network storage. And in this instance, okay, the logger is recording as you would expect, okay, and as we have the backup server configured, all right, the audio is brought from the logger itself, okay, and moved to a temporary image, okay, via the backup server. Excuse me. It sits in this temporary image until one of two things happens, really. Okay, once the temporary image becomes full, okay, and reaches its capacity, then it will automatically drop that information to the network storage. Okay, so until this becomes full, the network storage remains empty. As soon as this becomes full, all of that information or all of that audio is then to the network storage. Okay, another thing that can cause that within the network storage is a facility called stop and save. So if we wanted to do any maintenance or change anything on the loggers or whatever, okay, then we can use the stop and save functionality, and that does the same thing. It stops the backup working, and it automatically sends the audio to the network storage. Okay, so here we can see when the temporary image gets full, okay, then the audio is moved to the network storage, and then the temporary image will start to refill again. Just had a question there about the size of the temporary storage. To be honest, I'm not absolutely sure what size that is. I believe it is configurable, okay, and I'll get back to you on that. Okay, to be configurable in some way, but I'm not actually sure. So I'll come back to that later. That's Christoph. Okay. That was looking at the archive flow to network storage. If we take a look now at the archiving flow for the tape, it's similar, but we don't have that temporary image. What we have is the logger again, okay, recordings taking place, but in this instance, just step back, sorry. In this instance, the recordings take place, and via the backup server, okay, the audio is placed to the tape. And the tape then is able to take however many pieces of, or I should say segments of audio, okay, that it's capable of taking. Then we have to have some kind of regime for either overwrite or replacement of that tape. I'm just getting some questions. I'll come back to these questions shortly, okay, when we take a little bit of a break later on and try to answer them then. So slightly different in the way it works. There's no temporary image because we're not moving it to anywhere else. So as soon as the audio goes through the backup server, it then gets placed onto the tape, okay, and then we have to have some kind of regime for replacing those tapes. Once the archiving has taken place, and this shows it onto network storage, okay, but it's the same for the tape. Information has been, or that audio has been overwritten by FIFO and is no longer on the logger. We need to retrieve it back. So the retrieval process effectively is we go into the backup manager, which we will see later on, okay, and we retrieve information from wherever it is stored. Now, this is showing network storage, but it's the same for tape, okay? We look for the particular audio that we want, and we retrieve it. And that audio is retrieved back to the logger itself, ready for playback. Okay, hence this is why we call it offline. Okay, because we have to actually physically retrieve it back to the logger. Now, a point to note here is that if we bring across lots or large amounts of audio back to the logger, dependent upon the status of the logger capacity, okay, we may cause FIFO to kick in, all right, and delete information, okay, or audio. So we have to be aware of just how much audio we're bringing back from retrieval to the logger at any one time. Okay, so that's the retrieval flow. Now, just before we go into the actual configuring on the logger, I'll just see if I can answer some of these questions. Do we need a special license for network backup? No, it's more done in the configuration files. There's no license required, as I understand. Just making a note of that, or I will get back to you later on. But as I understand, there's no license required as such. Another one is if the logger fails during the temporary image, not full. How about the voice data? As the recordings take place, then the temporary image is being filled. If we get a problem with the logger, then we can just if it's the log not functioning, it goes completely down, then the temporary image will be with it. And that's one of the issues that we have with that. Okay. However, if it's just the information to the network storage and then deal with the logger. There's lots of questions. There's lots of questions coming in now. I will try to get back to them and ask them later. Where are we? Yeah, there's a couple of questions. As long as the logger's got the capacity, but you have to remember that if you do that, you can possibly, sort of like cause the FIFO to get rid of information that's not yet been archived. So you have to be aware of what you're doing. The buffer is set up automatically. Yeah, that's all part of the FIFO process. Separate server or just a component in the logger. The backup server is a component on the logger. Okay, and we'll see that shortly as we get into the configuration now. Okay, if I've missed any questions, I'll come back to that. I'll move on because we're running on time. Okay, logger offline backup, configuring the logger. Now we have to start at configuring the logger. Okay, now in TDM loggers rather, for tape and the DVD, it's done via configuration files. And we can see here the configuration file of the TDM logger stating quite clearly that we've got a number of tapes. Okay, and in this case, we've got 2 tapes, and they are DAT mirroring. We'll talk through mirroring later on. Okay, any configuration changes that are required, we want to change the tapes or the way the tapes work, then the configuration file needs to be rewritten, and the logger needs to be updated with that new configuration. Okay. For network path on the TDM loggers, then we would need to go to the setup tool, the nice log setup tool, okay, and set up archiving. So we would click on archiving. We would put our shared folder to wherever the network path is going to be, okay, and then we would indicate that path in the field here, okay, in the setup tool under archiving. Now the warning comes up again here to state that if the system was already configured for tapes and so on, then by setting up a network path and archiving in this way, then that would disable any of the tape or DVD, okay, in a nice perform system. Okay, so we have to take that into account when we are setting up a network path. So that's the network path in the TDM loggers. We'll move on now and take a look at VoIP loggers. Okay. In VoIP logger, then the configuration is done via this here, okay, which is the backup server tool. All right, and the backup server tool is found, okay, in on the logger itself, okay, in NT logger, logger testers, and then logger utilities. Okay, and there we have our backup server tool. If we had the server already existing and we just wanted to make changes to it, then we would need to disable the backup server and then reset it up, okay, to the new specifications. Network, I'll just do a quick question there. Is network backup supported by both TDM and VoIP? Okay, so you can have it on both. It's just that with TDM you would use the setup tool to set it up, okay, and configure it. And with VoIP loggers you would use this backup server tool. So let's just quickly run through the configuration of this. If we were to click on Enable Backup Server, this window comes up. Okay, and in the case of the VoIP logger, we can set up to look at for taped devices, okay, DVD, if we're in a nice perform system. In our instance here, that we are looking for a file system, okay. So we point this BSRV tool, backup server tool, to our shared folder or our shared location. I put it onto my Sentinel machine, but it would obviously be wherever the customer requires. Okay, so that's heading in this direction. Once I press next, okay, it comes up with the location that it's going to be sent to. So it's looked for that location and it's set that up. So that's configuring it to go to the network path, okay, which is to this location. Once we finish, okay, then we then need to restart the actual NICE VoIP logger service, okay. And on starting the NICE VoIP logger service, we will see this BSRV database. Now this is an empty folder already on the logger, okay, in the same area as the audio database. Until we restart the service, this area or this folder is empty. Okay. Once we restart the service, NICE VoIP logger, okay, we restart the service, and then the database, okay, fills up. Now this information here is effectively the same as the information that you find in the audio database. Okay, there is nothing we can do with this, and we should not do anything with it at all, effectively. Right? If we change any of the detail in here, delete any of it out, then we will not be able to regain this audio. Okay, so once we see that this is set up, we know that the logger is now configured, okay, for backup. From there, okay, we now need to go and configure the system admin within applications. So we set up a shared folder. We've configured the logger to send data to that shared folder. Yeah, somebody just asked, by restarting the service, does the recording stop? Yeah, you would have to do it in downtime. You'd have to do it in quiet time. Don't do it in a busy period. Okay. So once we've configured the logger, then go to sysadmin and configure in sysadmin. So here's my applications, and we can see now under the particular logger that we are using and we set the backup for, we now have this backup server option. Okay, there's no requirement to restart services at all on applications. Okay, we just need to come to applications, system administrator, and then we come to the particular logger, and if backup server doesn't show, then we need to click on the actual icon, the server icon itself, okay, and that will then bring the backup server icon into fruition, okay, and it will show. We can see at this point, initially in, okay, we've got a deck number 1. Because we're using network, there is only one means of archiving, okay, so there's only the one. It's a file system device, it's local at this point, and it's not used. So at this point, we now need to set it up, okay. So we set up, this gives us a wizard, okay, and it will tell us various different things that we could do during this wizard. If we change anything, okay, then it will cause the media to hit. That means that it will stop carrying out the archive until we've reinstated the archiving. So from this front screen, we go next, and once again, we're archiving, so the network path is already shown. Now, the network path here needs to be the IP address of that network path. If we try to put a host name in there, for instance, it will come up with this, all right? And it says basically needs the IP address, okay, and the shared folder name. No, I think, yeah, sorry, I need to step back slightly. Okay, so that needs to be the IP address. If we take a look at this now, okay, devices default assignment, okay, there is only one device because it's network, it's not tapes. The continuous is already clicked on, okay, that's because we've only got the one device again, okay, and I'll come back to channeled and mirroring in a second. For the actual archiving, the preferred option is automatic. Okay. However, we can set it up to periodically archive at a time for the logger, okay, and a particular day. So we can set it up at a particular time on a day, and it will carry out all of the archiving, okay, and that's all it will do on that day. Okay. We can also thing for the finish when the media becomes full, then it will stop archiving, okay, or periodically at a time, we can tell it to stop archiving, and we can possibly change tapes or whatever the scenario might be. Okay, the preferred option is automatic, it gets full. Now, just going back to channeled and mirroring here, okay, we can see this is grayed out. We can only use channeled and mirroring if we're using tapes. Now, channeled, if we tick off, we'll see a window later on, okay, will allow us to select particulars for archiving, okay, whereas with the network path, we don't get that. It will record and archive everything. Mirroring, 2 devices, we had 2 tapes, for instance, then we can either have those tapes running so that the first tape, when it comes for second tape, takes over and carries on archiving, or if we select mirroring, the 2 tapes run together, archiving the same information. Should one of those tapes fail in any way, then the other tape will take over, and that's basically the backup for the second tape. If we set a timeout here, for instance, we've got 30 minutes here, that means that as the 2 tapes are running together, if one tape fails, then the tape that is still functioning will continue or will pause for that 30-minute period. So it won't archive anything for that 30 minutes. If the old tape comes back up, okay, if the old tape comes back up, then at that point of that tape coming back in, then the 2 will start to work in tandem again. Okay, but if after 30 minutes the broken tape still isn't working, then the working tape will just continue then to archive after that point. Okay, so that's mirroring. A couple of questions here. Can Fuel use the network path for backup? I'll get back to you on that one. And another question there, what happens when the network storage becomes, there's some expiration policy. That would have to be worked through, okay? That would have to be managed in some way to either set up a new storage location. If it's tapes, for instance, then a warning on both elements, a warning would come in and the tape would have to be swapped out, okay, and a new tape put in. So that would be the same for the network as well. The network storage, you would have to manage it and then change that over. Okay, just moving on. Okay, we saw that. The next screen that we would see if we were using tapes, we would get this option to be able to overwrite, okay, or do not overwrite. This option will only show if you're using tapes, okay, and we have here overwrite always, which means once it gets to the end of the tape, it will start to overwrite, okay, which is not necessarily great. Or we can set up do not overwrite for 10 days or in this case 15 months, okay, and that effectively is retention, okay. And then some policy would have to be worked out for swapping those tapes out if you want to keep it for longer than that. The next screen that we see, we would only see if we had set up channeled, okay, and in this instance, if we were using tapes again, not the network, okay, then we could select particular channels to be archived, okay. So only these channels would get archived. Alrighty. So that's the configuration of the applications within system administration. So that only leaves us now to be able to use the actual backup manager itself now, which is the next element. We've done the configuration, now we need to actually work it. The backup manager process gives us access to archiving, retrieving, and stop and save. Oops, sorry, just go on. Okay, archiving speaks for itself. It allows us to be able to do the archiving. Okay, retrieving means we're bringing it back, and stop and save allows us to stop the actual archiving function and stop the backup server from functioning, and save everything to the archive location. And then we can carry out maintenance or whatever it is that we need to do, and then restart the archiving later. Accessing the backup manager is done through applications, and we go to the administration drop-down and select backup manager. Okay, once we're into backup manager, as we've already done the configuration for automatic archiving, okay, or continuous archiving, then once we click down and expand down to the particular logger that we are looking at, okay, then we can see that we have one deck because we're using archiving. If we had two tapes, then it would be deck 1 and 2. It's telling us that it's a file system device. It's automatic archiving, okay, and at this particular moment, the device is archiving, okay. We can just see that in bigger format now. For a little bit more information on what's occurring and the device, we can click on device info. And that tells us that this particular logger, okay, is backing up to this location, okay, IP address, and then the system itself. And the question that's been asked is whether more than one logger can go to this backup process before we see how it's done. Okay, audio's recorded onto the logger, and via the backup server, the audio to be moved now from this temporary image to the network storage. You can answer that very quickly on chat, or just think about it for a second and then I'll answer it. I don't want to hold too much time on this. Okay, it's recorded, and via the backup server, it's put to the temporary image. Okay, then a couple of things will cause it then to go to the network storage. I've had a couple of answers, so I shall answer it now for you. Okay, it is when the temporary storage becomes full, okay, or we select stop and save, okay, then that information will be sent to the network storage. Okay, so they're the two reasons. What happens then, okay, once the initial part or the initial storage has taken place to the network storage. In the temporary file that we've set up in this location, okay, here's my logger backup. Okay, in that temporary file, we will see two folders appear, admin and data. And in those, admin and data, we see this information here. This is the information about the information. And here we have the data itself. Nothing can be done with these. We can't open them up. We can't see any information in there at all. Okay. So we would leave these alone. And if nothing else, we would probably back them up at some stage, okay, for extra backup, okay, and resilience of the information. So they're formed on the very first archiving, okay. Retrieval. Okay, here's a quick question on retrieval. What do we need to take into account before we actually do any kind of retrieval? Because we're going to retrieve from the network storage back to the logger. Okay, just give you a second or two to think about that. Okay. Yeah, I've got a couple come up. That's good. All right. The thing that we need to take into account is how much we are going to bring back. Okay, how much are we going to retrieve? Because if we retrieve far too much, then we could end up with the problem with FIFO being activated, and we could lose information that we don't want to lose, or audio that we don't want to lose. Okay. There we go. Upon the request, then it's recorded back or returned back to the actual backup server. How do we do that? Okay. We come back into the backup manager itself. Okay. And we would go back down to the VoIP logger, make sure we're looking at the correct VoIP logger. We can see at this point it's archiving. Then we would come to the operation flag here, okay, and we would indicate retrieval. On pressing on retrieval, we get this, okay, which gives us the folder that is in that location, okay, and then we would select that folder to retrieve. The first thing that happens is the retrieval starts to work, and then it ends by saying it's ready for retrieval. Okay, so once we see this information, device ready, okay, the device status has changed. Once it's ready, we can then either double click on, whoops, yeah, sorry, we can either, let's just go to there, we can either double click on the row here, or we can go to media content. Okay, and in media content now, we get all of the channels that have been recorded and archived, okay, and we can retrieve the individual channel, or we can retrieve individual recordings. All right, if I just click on that, so we can look at the retrieving the channel, or we can look at what recordings are in that particular channel. If we just look at a little bit more detail, okay, if we click retrieve, it allows us to either bring the whole channel from channel start to channel end. Once again, you need to take into just how much audio you're going to bring across. Or we can tailor that down, okay, by selecting the other radio button and bringing the time and date down to a specific area that we want to retrieve. Without bringing too much back. If we look at recordings, then it will show us the actual recordings, okay, through a period of time that are on those channels. And then we from there as well, okay. And we can retrieve back the area or timings that we want. How do we play it back after that? Then we just go back to the business analyzer. We find the recording or the audio that we want to play back. Just briefly looking at the stop and save now. Okay. Here's our stop and save functionality. All right. The backup server is working. All right. If we, well, this is looking at it. The audio is being moved to the backup server. Okay, and to the temporary image, and then eventually onto the network storage. If we use stop and save, then it, oops, I'll get to it in a second. When we use stop and save, okay, it stops the server, the backup server, from working, and automatically drops everything to the network storage. Okay, once that's occurred, then there is no more audio is going to be backed up. It will still be recorded on the logger, okay, but it won't be backed up to the temporary image, and nothing will go forward to the network storage until we go back to the backup manager, okay, and set it back up for archiving. So let's just show that very quickly. Here's the file system. We go to stop and save, and it stops the archiving from taking place, stops the backup server from working, okay, takes all of the information that's in the backup server and puts it to the network location, okay, and at that point it will tell us that the file system is not being used at this point and that it is empty. Okay, to reinstate that, we would go back to operation, okay, and restart the archiving. Okay, so that's the PowerPoint side of it. I hope you all got that. As I mentioned, it's been recorded and will be on Nice University for you. There's another couple of questions just come up. I'll try and answer them and then very quickly do the demonstration. When you stop logger service, the stop and save functionality is activated automatically. I mean, the temp storage is flushed to the network storage. No, I wouldn't recommend just stopping the logger service without first doing a stop and save. That will then definitely stop the backup server, save everything to the storage, okay, and then you could stop the service on the logger. I would recommend doing it that way around. The question has been asked again: how much audio can you retrieve? Effectively, you can retrieve as much as the logger will take. Okay. However, you might want to think about whether you do that or not because of the FIFO element. Okay, so you'd have to be aware of how large the logger is. There's nothing to stop you bringing all of it back. If for instance, audio had been lost and you couldn't find it, okay, then some cases you might want to bring across large amounts or a whole channel worth of audio, okay, to be able to fault find and find that particular audio. Okay, but you have to take into account what's going to happen when you bring that amount across. Okay, limitations to network path temporary file, I don't believe so. Okay, that would depend on the amount of storage space required for long-term storage, just the same as the storage center, for instance. If the network path has changed for any reason, how do we proceed? We would have to go back to the logger, okay, take out the configuration that we already have, and then reconfigure the backup server. When retrieving from tape or network path, does that audio come back to the logger and played from it, or will it be played directly from the tape? It's played from the logger. That's the idea, is you retrieve it from the tape or the network path, and it comes back to the logger itself, and you replay it from the logger. Okay, that's why we have to be aware of how much audio we bring back to the logger. Okay. Right then, gents, I'll just do a very quick demo. We've got 5 minutes left, so I should be able to get this in. Okay, if I just bring up my server, which seems to have gone off. Okay, there's my app server. Let's bring it back. There we go. Didn't really need that to happen. All right, just to show you quickly, if we take a look at the VoIP block, no, that's gone off as well. Disconnect server, reconnect. Okay, back to here. Right, so here's my application server. I'll just very quickly go to System Administrator. Okay, here's my VoIP logger. If I open up my VoIP logger, we can see the backup server is there. Okay, if I click on the backup server, it's telling us okay, that it's automatically archiving. All right. As I mentioned, when you first come to this, if that doesn't show, then click on the VoIP logger that it's associated to, okay, and then that will come in. If I go to Business Analyzer, we can see some calls here, okay. The demo is sort of in the realms of these calls are no longer there. They have been FIFO'd out of the logger. Okay, so to retrieve those calls, we would go to our backup manager. Okay, here's my backup manager. I've expand down and find my particular logger. All right, and we can see that at the moment the logger is archiving. Okay, it's archiving away, and we then need to retrieve the information. Okay, you see here, there's the stop and save if we wanted to use that. But in our case, we want to retrieve that audio back from the archive location, okay, and replay it on Business Analyzer from the logger. So if I come to operation, okay, drop down operation, we can see we've got retrieval, manual archiving, and automatic archiving. I'll show retrieval, and then I'll talk about manual archiving in a second. To retrieve, we click on retrieve, okay. Oh, what's going on here? Anything to retrieve. Right, I'm going to have to do a stop and save, just a second. So I'm going to stop and save. This is simulating effectively the location or the temporary folder becoming full, okay, and has now archived to the file system. All right, so we can see at the moment that it's not being used, all right, because I've stopped and I've saved. So I've simulated it becoming full. I'm now going to start the archiving again. Okay, automatic archiving is starting again, copying media to the file system. So now we should have, hopefully, if I click on here, okay, media content, there's nothing in there because it's all gone to the final location. Okay, if I go to the Sentinel machine, good Lord. All right, if I go to the Sentinel machine and my logger back up there, we can see that the folder is there with the admin, okay, and the data. Go back to applications and now try retrieval. Okay, I want to retrieve that information back now, the retrieve or from the archive location. Here we now have the data. There's that folder, okay, that has been configured. All right, we select, and we can see that automatic archiving disappears, retrieval takes over, and it's preparing. Okay, there we go. Now we're ready. So once we're ready, we can now either double tap on the file, or sorry, on the row, go to media content, and then we can look at the channel. Now I've only got one channel recording. Okay, that's all I have on this system. So I can either retrieve straight from there, okay, which gives me the option to do a complete channel, okay, or I can tie it down to a particular time range. Or I can go to recordings, and that shows me the recordings that are on that channel. There's one from 2013 and the two calls there from earlier. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that down. I'm going to retrieve, and I'm just going to retrieve the whole lot for this demo. Okay, retrieval's taking place, retrieval ready. Okay, so now I've retrieved that back from the storage location. I'm going to go back to my Business Analyzer, and I'm going to now play back that call. Hopefully. There we go. There's my call. All right, retrieved back and played back. I just stopped that now. That's good. Just had a quick question there from somebody. So when you click stop and save, new media set is created. Yes, initially. Yeah, so and until you do that stop and save first, or until the file system and then sends the video down to the actual network location, okay, there will be nothing in that folder. It's only when that very first archiving takes place to the end location that those files are created. Okay. So just very quickly, because we're just a few seconds over time now, I just very quickly want to go back to Backup Manager, and I noticed here, or we should have noticed, that we have manual archiving. Okay, if we click on manual archiving, we can set it up then to either overwrite everything that's there, okay, or just append what is there, okay, in the system, in order for us to effectively purge the logger, if you like, and extract the archiving location. All right, it won't clear the logger, but it'll clear the backup serve location. And we would possibly want to use that if we wanted to carry out maintenance on the logger, for instance. We can do a manual archive, get the information across, and then we can start work on the logger. Okay, so manual archiving as well. All right, gents, that's really all I want to show you. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Okay, hopefully that was useful to you and has given you some insight into something that you've possibly not utilized before. At this point, I'd just like to say, gents, thank you very much for attending. And if there are any outstanding questions, I will get back to you on those. Okay, to answer via email. Okay, and I'll keep this open for a little while longer and try and answer some of your questions now. Okay, I realise straight away. So, gents, once again, thank you very much. I will stop the recording on this now, and it will be put on to NICE University. Have a nice day. Thank you very much.